Right, hi everyone. It's 11 o'clock, so I think we're going to get started. Thank you for coming. There's like a few people just joining now, so I'm just gonna, if you've just come on, have a look at the puzzle, give you about 30 seconds, and then we're actually going to get started. I just want to give these people who are joining now just a second to get going. Okay. Exciting. School starts next week. Some of you are already at school. Right, okay, I think we've got enough here now, so let's get going. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you coming. For most of you, it's probably still your summer holidays. August is a very precious time for teachers, where August is the one month of the year where we shouldn't be doing any work, but of course we do end up doing some. And I know that some of you are already back in schools, and some of you have joined from other countries. I will mainly be talking about the sort of scenarios in England in this session, but hello to those of you joining from overseas. So my name's Jo. I am a maths teacher and currently an assistant head in a comprehensive school in South London. In this session, I'm mainly talking to people who are fairly new to maths teaching, although of course experienced teachers always benefit from a bit of CPD as well. So anyone's welcome here. Let me talk to you then about what we're going to do today. Okay. First of all, if there's a little chat, I can't see it, but some of you might be able to see a little chat box where people sort of talk throughout the presentation. And if you find that kind of stops you from being able to listen to me, then feel free to kind of drag it off the screen. I've been in sessions like this before where I've been trying to read the chat and trying to listen, and I found it really difficult. So you can drag it off the screen if you want to, just make it a pop-up and just drag it off. If you want to ask me a question, I can't see that chat function, okay? So with the chat, if you want to ask me a question, don't put it in the chat. There's no way I'll see it, but you can put it in the Q&A, but can you do that near the end of the session? I'm going to leave at least 10 minutes at the end for questions, and I won't see your question if you put it in the Q&A now, or if you put it in the chat. So near the end, if you put it in the Q&A, then I'll address it if I've got time in the questions at the end, okay? Right, so let's look at what we're going to do today. Right, the first thing we're going to do, and this is very weird because I've never done this before, is we're going to look at pandemic pedagogy. So we're going to say what specific things this year are different that we need to think about as maths teachers. So what might have changed in our schools, and how does that affect our lessons, and what are the little things that we just need to be bearing in mind that we might not have thought of ourselves, because none of us have ever done this before. I have to, as assistant head at my school, I have to do a presentation like this for my staff. So I've taken some of those ideas. I've also taken some ideas from things I've done in the past, like for example, when I was a part-time teacher, I didn't have my own classroom. And so I've got some ideas that I can share with you today, although of course I've not done it before, so we're all learning together. After we've done that, which is kind of half the presentation, the second half will be on our lesson planning processes. So this is like general, this is not pandemic related, this is just general maths teaching stuff, what we can do when planning our lessons, some really cool resources I'm going to show you. I love showing resources, and it gets people really excited about teaching when they look at resources. And how to get organised, and that's one of the biggest challenges when we have thousands of great resources, is how we actually narrow them down and deal with such an overwhelming number of things. Okay. Finally, time for questions at the end. But like I say, don't ask them now. Wait till the end and do put them in the Q&A. Okay. So before we get started with some ideas for this pandemic pedagogy, I want you to have a think about what you know. So this is for you personally, and you don't need to share it. You can just think about this and just reflect on, do you know the following things about, and let's imagine you're starting next week. You might have already started back, but let's imagine you're going back to school next week, and do you know these things? Do you know what classes you'll be teaching? Some teachers have not seen their timetables yet, and that would make me really, really unhappy. I plan my first lessons over summer every year. I don't plan any more than that. And when I was NQT, I made the mistake of planning the first 2 weeks of lessons in advance, and then in about day 2 or day 3 of term realised that I had to put all that in the bin, because it was all a waste of time, because obviously we have to respond to our students and move at their pace. So planning too far in advance in too much detail is a little bit of a waste of time, but I certainly plan my first lessons in the holidays, and for that I need to know what classes I'm teaching. I need to know if we set, I need to know what set they are, and I need to know what they're going to be doing. What topics are you starting with? So you should have seen your scheme of work. I hope you have seen your scheme of work, okay? If you've seen your scheme of work, you'll know for each year group what their first topic is, and that means you can start planning those lessons. If you don't know either of those two things, and you're new to teaching, then there's no harm in emailing your head of maths in the holidays to ask to be told what those things are. They might not be able to tell you your timetable, but they should. They certainly can tell you what the first topic of the year is for each year group. They certainly should know their schemes of work. So please don't feel that because it's the holidays, you can't contact your head of maths or whoever's in charge of you. Okay, you should be able to ask them, what is my first topics? And then I can start planning. Who's on your team? So for me, that's important as someone that manages a team, because I need to know that I've got 2 new NQTs joining my team, and I need to know how I'm going to help them when they had their training year cut off, how I'm going to help them to get settled quickly, and how I'm going to help them to develop their practice in a slightly different circumstance to normal. So who's on your team? Do you know where you'll be teaching? And we're going to talk a lot about that today, whether you're teaching in your own classroom, your own maths room, or you're going to be moving around the school. Do you know where you'll be teaching? It's really important that you know that. And finally, do you know what routines and restrictions your school has put in place? We know kind of what the government's saying. The government are very vague, but do we know what your school is saying? Because every school is different. Some of you will not know that until inset day, okay? But at the very least, I hope you know what classes you're teaching and what topics you're starting with for those classes, okay? And if not, email your head of maths and just say, could you let me know? Because it would really help me to get planning just those first couple of lessons. Of course, you can plan them on inset days, but you tend to find you've got a million things to do on those first inset days. So it's actually really helpful to just get those first lessons planned just before you go back. It really helps. You don't have to, but it really helps. And now let's think about what's different. So this is an unusual year, and think about what would be different this year to a normal year in teaching. Okay, so first of all, we have this, what I call nomadic teachers situation. And what I mean by that is, normally a maths teacher teaches in a maths classroom, and if you're lucky, it's your own maths classroom. You have all your stuff in there, you have it set up exactly how you want, you decide the seating plan, and you have all your equipment exactly where you need it, and you teach in that room for all your lessons and the students come to you. In England, this September, for the vast majority of teachers, they will not have their own room. So for example, and you'll have something similar probably, I'm going to be teaching year 8 in the maths corridor, year 7 in the English corridor, and I'll be teaching year 9 in the humanities area, and I only have year 7, 8 and 9 at my school at the moment because we're a new school. So I'm going to be moving around the school. I've got colleagues who work on really large sites, and they're teaching year 7 to 13, and they will be doing a lot of travelling between lessons. That really changes everything. It is a challenge. It's only temporary. We know it will go away eventually, but that's something you need to know. Are you going to be a nomadic teacher? Will you have to support at a distance? And I think for most of us, the answer is probably yes. And what I mean by that is no circulating around the room. Circulating for me has always been my #1 way of formative assessment. So what I mean by that is the way that I know whether my students understand what's going on is I walk around the room and look over their shoulders and ask them questions during the lesson. If they put up their hand and say, I'm stuck, miss, I will go over to them and I will kneel down next to them right in their face. So airways right next to each other, so we can't do that anymore. And I will help them with whatever they're stuck on. That obviously has gone, and that in most schools will be the case. So most of us will have to support at a distance, and unfortunately we will not be able to help students in the way we're used to. That to me is the bigger challenge than having to move classrooms. Groupings. Now this doesn't affect me. The way my school have done it is we are still teaching in sets. I know some of you probably don't teach in sets anyway, but my school teaches in sets. So the way that it's going to work is between lessons, students will move between classrooms in their bubble corridor. So we still get to teach in sets. Some of you will have to teach mixed attainment groups for the first time. And that is a challenge if you've not done it before. Every time I teach mixed attainment in say year 7, it gets about 2 weeks into term and I'm like pulling my hair out saying, I can't do this. I've got some students who can't add, some students who don't seem to be able to do a basic number sequence of even numbers. They can't get their head around that. And I've got some students who are flying ahead and they could probably take their GCSE and do pretty well. So I've got all those in the same room. I find that really challenging. Some teachers can do this really well. I find it quite a challenge. I'm very relieved that I'm not having to teach mixed attainment this year because I'm not trained in it, I'm not experienced in it. Some of you will have to do that. And there are lots and lots. If you look at my most recent blog posts, there are loads of links you can read to help you with that. Handouts, will you be able to hand things out to students? I'm probably have the biggest photocopying bill in the school. I always think they're not going to sack me, surely not going to sack me over photocopying too much, although I do sometimes get a bit of a word in my ear from the head teacher for my huge photocopying, because I love a good handout. I like choosing activities that involve students writing on sheets. And so that's something I'm going to have to cut down a lot on this year. I have cut down over the years, and not as bad as I used to be, but I think at my school, we're going to be allowed to hand things out as long as we've got sanitised hands, but we're going to be really encouraged to minimise those handouts. In some schools, handouts will be totally banned. So that's something that will change quite a lot in the way that I teach, certainly. And finally, the curriculum, is that different this year? Now, for me, that's not different. We taught during lockdown, we carried on with our schemes of work. All the students studied at home using Hegarty Maths, the topics that we wanted them to study, that we would have taught them at school, and they're coming back and just continuing. So we haven't had to change our schemes of work to kind of go back and reteach that stuff. But I'll talk later about how we're going to catch up the students who didn't do much at home, because we all have plenty of those. Okay, so those are all things you need to know for your school. And again, you might not know them at this point. It might be that you need to contact your head of maths and just say, by the way, am I moving classrooms? Am I allowed to do handouts, things like that? Or it might be you can just wait till inset day to find those things out. Okay, but this stuff will differ for every school. Now, a teacher's classroom is their castle. This is, you know, to have your own classroom is amazing. And if you're very lucky, you get your own classroom at some point and it's wonderful. Some teachers like to put a lot of effort into making them their home. Some teachers don't care so much about that. This picture, I don't know, I'm assuming this is an American classroom because of the space they've got. In English classrooms, we don't tend to get quite so much space. Our classrooms are much smaller because we have less room in this country. But I'm assuming this is an American picture. But you can see that the teacher who has created this classroom pictured really loves her stuff and really likes everything to be in exactly the right place. So she's got her inbox trays for students to say hand in homework and things like that. You can see that she's got everything organised exactly how she wants it. I love the way that she's got her laptop at the side so that she can sit in her chair and see the class, but she can turn to do the register and stuff like that. There's lots and lots of nice things about how this teacher's done their classroom. And to lose that is really quite upsetting. So I'm going to have to go in this week and clear out my classroom because it will be used by teachers from all sorts of different subjects this year. So I take all my personal stuff out, and that's quite difficult. Instead, this year will look a bit like this. Now, I've done this before. These are all different ways that teachers can carry their stuff around school. And some teachers manage to carry far less than others. I'm always someone that takes a lot of stuff with me because from experience, I know, because when I used to be part-time after I had children, I didn't have my own classroom. And I was having to move between classrooms between every lesson. And I would often arrive in a classroom and find, oh, this room doesn't even have a whiteboard rubber, let alone any other equipment. Like there's nothing that I can use in here. So I used to arrive in totally empty rooms with nothing. So I had to take everything with me. Now, some teachers like these trolleys you can pull around. That's not going to work for me because I have to go up and down stairs. So I'll have them on these big boxes like the bar at the end. I've got one from previous years and it's important it's got a lid on it so your stuff doesn't fall out as you're walking down the corridor. But whatever you do, you might find it helpful to have a box. Your school might buy you one. You might not need one. You might be a minimalist teacher. Let me tell you about some of the things that I carry around to lessons with me. Now, in my pre-COVID world, I'll tell you some of the things I would have had in that box. There's a lot. Box of tissues, absolutely. I would never teach. 10 years ago, I became a teacher, well, a bit longer than that now, and I didn't realise in my first year that if you don't have a box of tissues, you're in trouble because you'll have students who sniff and students where they'll get ink on their hands and all sorts of things. So I now have baby wipes and I have tissues everywhere I go. So I've got a box of tissues always with me, and it stops them saying, I need to go to the toilet to get some tissues. Like, no, you can have one of mine. So that's the sort of thing I would always carry with me. Spare exercise books, whiteboard pens, and a whiteboard rubber in case you get to a room that doesn't have one. I always have a few calculators to lend my students. I'm not sure I'm allowed to do that this year. Maybe I can if I just wipe them down after use, but I will have to carry those with me. Stickers and stamps. Yeah, you've done really well. Have a sticker. Students love that. Even year 11 students, even sixth form students love a sticker. Again, don't know if I'll be able to do that this year because I can't really get to them, but that would be something I would normally have in the box of stuff I carry around. Spare pencils to lend students. Maybe I need a hole punch, maybe I need glue, maybe I need staplers. The folders at the bottom represent folders containing the worksheets I'm going to use in the lesson. So if I'm going to a class and I know that I'm going to have to hand out worksheets, that's all going to have to be in the big box that I carry. And these boxes get really heavy when you end up with all this stuff in there. Okay, so this is all the kind of thing I would normally have, and that's the sort of thing you would need to consider you're going to have to carry from lesson to lesson. Some of your school might say, we guarantee that every classroom you get to is going to have a good stock of whatever, box of tissues or a whiteboard rubber. But if you're not allowed to share things with other teachers, then you need to think about all this stuff. So that's one kind of category. Another category, it's slightly different, and this will depend on schools, but visualizer. Visualisers have become a really big deal in recent years. They're very fashionable to use visualisers in teaching. Some teachers have an exercise book where they basically replicate, this is the work that they want their students doing under the visualiser. So they model in the exercise book with the visualiser showing the class what they're writing down, and then the students know exactly how they should lay out their work. There are other uses of visualisers, particularly during times where we can't necessarily get to our students, for example, looking at their work. So ask the student to put their work under the visualiser, and comes up on your computer screen, and then you can give them support if they're stuck. Now, at my school, we're meant to have a visualiser in every classroom, which we wipe down at the start of the lesson. Okay, some of you might not have that. Some of you might want to get your own visualiser. You don't have to use a visualiser, but you might find it helpful. Mini whiteboard. Some schools are just saying no. At my school, we're very lucky. We're going to have mini whiteboards in stationery packs. So that means that the students will come in the morning, pick up their, I think it's A3 stationery pack, and in that they've got all the equipment they will need, including a personal mini whiteboard, so they don't have to share it with anyone else. Okay. In normal times, I'd probably carry mini whiteboards from lesson to lesson, but that's really heavy and we can't do that at the moment. I put a high-vis jacket. Some of you will think that's crazy, but at my school, when you're on duty, you wear a high-vis jacket. We're going to be on duty all the time. Duties are going through the roof because we have all these different bubbles in the playground, so we're using lots more space. So teachers are going to be on duty a lot, temporarily, I hope. So I'll need to carry that with me. Normally I just leave it on my classroom chair, but I'll have to carry my high-vis jacket. And for me, I'm going to have to carry my laptop to every lesson, because we're going to arrive in our classrooms and just plug those laptops in. Okay, you might not have that situation in your school, you might not even have your own laptop, but at my school, to stop us having to clean the computer between each teacher, we're going to plug the laptops in. Okay, so that's another group of stuff. Finally, other things I might want to have in my teacher box to take to classes, lessons with me, are maths equipment. Now, this is going to be a lot harder because the students aren't meant to be sharing equipment, so I'm not sure we can do this. I hate teaching without a meter ruler. I use the meter ruler all the time. I'm constantly reminding them what a meter looks like and using it for various things. So I hate it that I won't have a meter ruler, but I'm not going to be putting that in my box to carry around. I'm just going to have to live without it. Compasses and protractors, I think we're just going to have to delay the use of those. There's no way that we can lend those out because students are going to be having to touch them. Unless if they haven't got their own, I'm afraid I can't lend them. So I'm going to push back the topics that require those and hope that at some point all these restrictions end and we can teach those topics. And then manipulatives, I don't think teachers are going to be able to use them because you can't have students all touching the same thing. But in normal times, those might be some of the things that I put in my big teacher box. Okay, so just have a think about all that. You'll have totally different stuff to me. Some of you this won't even affect at all, but if you're moving from lesson to lesson, then this is stuff that you need to think about. Let's think about starting lessons in a COVID world. Okay, so I had some ideas here. I've got 3 different options when I was thinking, how am I going to do this? My first option was this. So normal times, obviously students line up outside and I let them in and I'm all ready. But now I'm going to arrive at my lesson and my students will already be in the room. This is a massive pain because they're going to be disrupted. They're not going to be calm like I want them. So the option 1 is I arrive, and then as I walk in, I've got my whiteboard pen in hand, I put my box down and I write a starter task on the board. So I write something on the board, some maths that they can just start doing. And I say, right, get going on that task now. They start the work, I go log in, plug my laptop in, do the register, get my PowerPoint up, ready. Okay, so that's option 1. Then I thought another option is that I arrive and I have a stack of sheets. I've got sanitized hands or gloves on, and I get a student to hand those sheets out. I can't hand them out. I'm not allowed in the room with them. I have to stand in my box at the front, but a student can hand those out. Or the students can hand them out in a very kind of efficient way. I'll show you that in a minute. And they start working and I can log in. But the third option, this is what I'm going to go with, is that at the start of term, I'm going to give every student a starter booklet. Okay, so I've made those booklets already for my classes that I'm teaching. I'm going to hand out those booklets on the first day at the same time I hand out their exercise books. They'll keep them in the back of their book. And then when I arrive, they should already be working, in theory. And if I train them well, and if we have some kind of consistent approach on this across the school, then hopefully this will work. So where the students know that when I arrive, they better be working on their starter booklet so we don't have any lost time. And then I should be able to sneak in quietly while they're working, in theory, and then I should be able to log in, do my register, get my lesson ready to go, and then start with going through the task that was in their booklet. So that's what I'm going to go with. I've made booklets for my year 7s. It's on my blog if you want to see it. And that's kind of what it looks like. There's like a warm up for each day, which has got 5 questions. I've actually used it for year 7 ones. I've taken them from old SATs papers. They're kind of some of the more challenging questions from old SATs papers. I've got, I don't know anything about the attainment and level of my year 7 class, so I've had to take a gamble. And I've done that for half a term. So at half term, I'll make another booklet if I think it's going well. Okay, so I haven't made a whole term's worth of stuff, but I've done, it's not going to be that much printing because it's half a page each. They're double-sided, 4 lessons a week. It's not as bad as it sounds. I'm going to hole punch their books. I'm going to go in this week and hole punch their exercise books. They're going to use treasury tags, and then they're going to treasury tag these in the back cover of their books so they don't fall out. So that's what I'm planning to do. Of course, there are other ways of doing this. You can do the starter booklet thing without having to make your own starter booklets. I published a series of self-quizzing books for students, which is just sort of self-quizzing on basic facts for GCSE. They would work really well as lesson starters. So every lesson a student knows they have to do a page from their book. They're something you'd have to buy. Or if you want to, you could use Corbett Maths. So Corbett Maths has lots of different levels: numeracy, foundation, foundation plus, higher, higher plus, 5-a-day exercises, which are basically 5 questions. Now, these could easily be printed out and made into a starter booklet without you having to create your own starter booklets. So that's something I would really recommend thinking about before term starts. Great thing is, this year I've made all my starters. So I've saved myself a load of lesson planning time, which is great. So I know that normally, whenever I plan a lesson, I think about how am I going to start this lesson? And actually I've done it all over summer this year. So it's actually going to save me time in term time. And I wonder why I never did this before. But yeah, this is one of the ideas, and you might have other ideas for how to start your lessons. Right, first lessons. This is exciting. I love meeting a class for the first time. It really is a very exciting day. And I've got a year 7, a year 8, and a year 9 class this year, and I just can't wait to meet a lot of them. They're students I don't know. And I will do pretty much the same thing in every one of my first lessons with them, which I've already planned. So I will introduce myself. I'll tell them a bit about me. I need them to know that they can trust me. So I'll tell them that I'm a really experienced teacher, but if I wasn't really experienced, then I might tell them, hey, I have a maths degree, or I might tell them, oh, I worked at the school down the road last year, and you don't have to say, oh, this is my first time teaching or anything like that. Don't say that. Just tell them a little bit about how excited you are to teach them or something, and just make sure they know that you know exactly what you're doing, and they'll feel confident in you from day one. I hand out their books, their starter packs, get all that set up. This takes time. All of this stuff takes longer than you expect. I talk about my expectations and the routines for the year. So I'm telling them right from the start, this is how behaviour will work. When I do this, you respond in this way. I will accept these sorts of things. I will not accept these other things. And that has to be crystal clear from the start. In any school, I made the mistake when I was NQT I was in a grammar school, and I didn't do any of this, and they were very chatty. They weren't badly behaved, they were chatty. And then I look back and think, I never even told them they shouldn't chat. Like, it's so important to get those expectations and routines crystal clear. I'll give them a quick overview of the year ahead and tell them how excited I am. With year 8, I'll say, we're going to do Pi this year. That is so exciting. I can't wait to teach you Pi. We've got that coming in January. I bet you're all looking forward to it. And that's the kind of thing. Or I might say to them, we've got some really good new topics this year, things you've not seen before. We're going to do Pythagoras. You don't know what that is yet, but just wait, you're going to love it. So I'll say that kind of thing and give them that kind of excitement about the year ahead. Then I'll get on with the maths. And sometimes you run out of time in the first lesson, but I'm hoping very much that my first lesson will have at least half the lesson will be an actual maths lesson. In previous years, I've done all kind of other puzzles and stuff and activities. This year, I'm just going to get on with it. I just need to get on with the teaching. I don't want to show you one of my first lessons in detail, but that's just a screenshot of the first 12 slides from my year 8 first lesson this year. Starting with their seating plan, which I've done on our system. Our register system has its own seating plan thing built in, so I didn't have to sort of make my own. Talking about their aims for the year, showing them a timeline for the year, going through some rules, going through some of the routines that I'll be using, talking about how well I want their books presented, showing them what we're doing in the first topic, and then just going straight in with that topic. So by the 9th slide, I have started teaching maths. And that will be a good half the lesson, hopefully, depending on how long it takes to get them in their seats and get their books out. I just want to show you the 6th slide there. I'm showing them that when I put a little icon on the screen, it means something that I need them to know what it means. So if they see the little listening icon, that means I'm talking, and they need to be listening, and they can put their hand up to ask a question, but basically that means they shouldn't have anything in their hands. When I put a little mini whiteboard sign up, that means that they're going to do some work on the mini whiteboard, they're going to show me, and we're going to discuss it. And when they see the little book icon on a slide, that means I want them to write something down. That either means make notes, so write down what's on the slide, or complete a task in their book. And if you look at my, I know it's hard to see because it's small, but if you look at the bottom row of my slides there, you can see that I've used those icons. And I'm going to, this year, for the first time, going to try and use these icons in every single slide that I use all year, so the students always know, are they meant to be writing, are they meant to be listening, or are they meant to be mini whiteboarding, and that's going to be my little icons that I use all year round. I've got a colleague who does this really well, and I'm trying to copy what he does, because he's not a maths teacher, but he's an RS teacher, and he does it so well with these little icons. Students always know exactly what they're meant to be doing. Seating plans. It's funny, I found this old picture. If you can see that picture, it's an old picture of a class sort of sitting, a maths class, not from pedagogy, not from pandemic pedagogy times, but just from normal times. But they're all kind of sitting facing the front, and that's probably how a lot of our classrooms will be set up. I don't think this is a normal class though, because if you look at the mini whiteboard that girl at the front's holding up, that looks like it's further maths, certificate of further maths, because it's that's beyond GCSE. Now the big difference between what we're going to have in September and this photo here is the location of the teacher. When I teach, I'm going to be in a box at the front of the room that I'm not allowed to leave, a box drawn on the floor, not an actual box. And most of you will be the same. So we won't be able to stand in amongst the students like that teacher is. But our students across the country will all have to face the front, which is something I did anyway, so I'm not bothered about that. As I mentioned earlier, in my NQ2 year, I worked in a grammar school, and I stupidly didn't do seating plans. And I don't know why, because it would have been way better. So I just had everyone sitting with their mates. And you often, even if you have a seating plan, you'll get a student come up to you saying, oh, can I sit next to my friend? I'll work better. And I just don't agree with that. I just think it's nonsense. They'll work better with their friends. I mean, occasionally, perhaps, but in the most part, they're going to eventually start playing up. Maybe, depends on the sort of school you're in. But I would say have a really good seating plan in place. Now, when I say really good seating plan, I mean you ask last year's teacher if you can. So year 7, it's going to have to be random. But if you can, you ask last year's teacher, who do I need to separate? Who's going to mess around if I put them near each other? Who needs to be near the front? Who needs to be near the back? You know, I always do a seating plan, and then someone comes up to me the first day and says, Miss, you could put me at the back, but I have really bad eyesight and I need to sit in the front. And it's like, oh, I have to change everything. I spent so long on it. But just really think about your seating plans, because it does make a difference. It's very important. And you tell them in first lesson, you will sit where I tell you to sit, and I will change it when I see, when I think it's the right time to change it. And this year, it becomes more important. I'll talk about that in a second, about why it's more important to get it right. Let's quickly look at some routines then. So this is in pandemic pedagogy mode. What routines do we need to think about? Right, first of all, routine 1. When you arrive at the classroom, they have their equipment out, they have their maths book out, and hopefully they are all working. They know exactly what they're meant to do, they know exactly where they're meant to do it. So they're not thinking, oh, am I allowed to write on this booklet? Or, oh, am I allowed to get started before the teacher arrives? You need to be crystal clear, and that needs to be set up in the first lesson. That is a desirable routine. Second desirable routine is that when a student needs help during a lesson, they know what to do, and you have thought in advance about how you're going to do that. Miss, I'm stuck. What are you going to do if you can't reach them? I'll talk about this in a second, but this is really important that students know from the beginning that they can tell you when they need help. It's nothing worse than a student who needs help feeling that they can't ask for help. And if you need any materials handed out, and if you're allowed to do so in your school, some schools are saying no handout, but if you're allowed to, you need to find an efficient way of getting it around the room, given that you can't hand things out because you're not allowed to go into their classroom. Okay, you're allowed to stand at the front, you've got another way of doing it. I'll just show you, this is like a 1 second little GIF from Mcrae School.
Go.
And this is super efficient handing out of things without the teacher being involved. I'm always impressed by that. I'm going to show you it again.
Go.
So look, they're handing things out in about 5 seconds, maybe even less. And the teacher hasn't had to go into the room with them, okay? There's no time wasted. They all know exactly what they're doing. If you want your lessons to be like this, you need to teach it, you need to practice it. This needs to be something you literally say, right, we're going to practice it, we're going to practice it again, this is exactly how it's going to work. And it won't just happen. I've tried this before without like making a fuss of it and just sort of saying, like, can we all just hand things out by passing it down? And I've been really vague about it. It doesn't work. If you want this, you have to make it a big deal of it. And practice and practice and practice. This is a great way of handing stuff out without the teacher having to go into the room. Now let's think about support. And this is the bit that I think everyone's really stressed about. Students get stuck, doesn't know how to do the particular bit of maths, and we don't know how to help them because we can't get to them. We can't go and talk to them. And we don't want to say to the whole class, right, everyone stop because Fred is stuck and everyone listen while I help Fred. And we don't want to interrupt everyone because that would be a nightmare. So we need to find a way. So one thing you need to do is, by talking to last year's teacher, if you can, figure out the students who are likely to need the most support during the lesson and have them in the front row of your seating plan from the beginning. Okay, you'll be able to help them directly, hopefully. I mean, won't be able to stand right next to them, but you'll be able to walk along the front of the room. And it might be that within a few weeks you realise that someone you've sat at the back constantly needs help, and then you can just change the seating plan and have them at the front. But really, that's why the seating plan is so important this year, because that front row is going to be probably the only students you can really get to. It might be you have a TA in the room who's sitting with an individual student and is allowed in the room with them, and they might not then need to be at the front. On Twitter, someone said, oh, but the people that need help change for every topic, and that's not my experience. Generally, you have students who are struggling with the pace of the class, maybe because they're in the wrong set, and they ask for help a lot because they just get stuck. They look at it and they have no idea what to do. And that tends to be the same students for most topics. Or you get students who just struggle a bit with processing instructions, and they can get on with the maths if you can't, once you've gone over and said to them, right, this is what I want you to do, this is what the task is. So they're the ones I might sit at the front. And it's difficult if you've got a lot of students like that, because you can't put them all in the front row. Okay, so perhaps in that case you might want to find the stronger, more confident students and sit them next to the students they might be able to support. That might work. Okay, these are just ideas. It might be that you do a lot more mini whiteboard work than usual. Some of you might already do loads of mini whiteboard work, but you might want to have them do a lot of their work, including their workings, not just the answers, their workings on mini whiteboards, hold them up, and then you'll be able to identify students that need help and then give them very quickly some individual feedback on where they've gone wrong, so they're getting that support. Or it might be that you have a visualizer. Some teachers are going to put a visualizer right in the middle of the room, on the desk in the middle of the room. I don't know how that's going to work because they have to attach it to the computer, so some kind of cable trickery. And then they're going to say to students, if you're stuck, just put your work on the visualizer desk and I'll be able to see it on my screen, and then I'll be able to communicate with you across the room. It's not ideal because you're disturbing people who are working, but perhaps. The other idea is just about the structure of your lessons. Keep the class together more than perhaps you would have previously. So maybe you used to have long periods of independent work where students, say, spent 20 minutes working on an exercise. Maybe you'll do less of that this year because that's when students get stuck and need help, or that's where you do a lot of circulating. So you might, if you don't already do this, do a lot more modelling and then short exercise, then modelling and then short exercise, keeping the chunks of teaching smaller, and the opportunities to get stuck less because you're teaching things in small chunks, perhaps. So it might be that a slight change in approach might be helpful if you are someone that does a lot of circulating, which I do normally. Filling lockdown gaps. Now, this is a massive question, and actually I really like the way that my head of maths in my school has decided that we're going to do this. What we've done is we've said, let's say year 8, during lockdown, they did Pythagoras, they did sequences, they did ratio, did various things, but Pythagoras was a new topic. And we know that about half our year group did all the work, and some of the rest did none or some of the work. So we know that we're going to have a lot of students who really haven't seen Pythagoras before, even though they were meant to do it at home on Hegarty Maths. So the way we're dealing with it is this. This is my year 9 starter. This is my first lesson year 9 starter. I've got a kind of lowish set, not bottom set, but I've got a year 9 class that will need a fair amount of support and going through these things again. So their starter in their first lesson is mixed retrieval. So I've got an order of operations question, a ratio question, and then I've got this Pythagoras question in there. And the whole department's doing this. So all the teachers in my department are putting Pythagoras in their year 9 starters for half of the first half term. So for about 3 or 4 weeks, we're doing Pythagoras only in there. And the reason we're doing that is because we need them to learn Pythagoras if they didn't do it while they were at home, or we need them to revise it if they did do it while they're at home. So the first question is just label the sides, the hypotenuse. Then the next day in their starter, because I would have gone through that, I'm asking them to find the lengths of the hypotenuse using Pythagoras. Now, if they did that in lockdown, they might remember. If they didn't do it in lockdown, they have no clue how to do that. So I go through it. I'm basically doing a mini Pythagoras lesson in the review of my starter. The next starter is another question, Pythagoras, same thing, find the length of the hypotenuse. And I've taught that to them the day before, after the starter. So I'm sort of finding a way of teaching Pythagoras in this kind of post-starter run-through. It means my starters will take a bit longer to go through than usual. So they're basically going to be learning the lockdown stuff in their normal lessons when I'm also teaching them another topic. And then the rest of my starters all have Pythagoras in for the next 3 weeks or 2 weeks. So Pythagoras, Pythagoras, Pythagoras in every starter. And so by the time I get to the end of those 3 weeks of lessons, say, I have, by using the starters, retaught them a topic they were meant to do in lockdown. For some of them, it would just be revision. For some of them, it would have been new, and also carried on with the curriculum. Okay, so that's how we're doing it at my school. I'd love to hear ideas from other schools of how they're going to do it. Right, and before I move on to kind of lesson planning and resources, I just want to look at stretch. Now, you'll always need to have stretch material ready for your classes. Some of you will be teaching more mixed attainment now, so this will become more of a big thing. It's like making sure that you've got enough to keep the really, really quick students, or the smart, bright students, or those that have done loads of stuff, loads of tutoring over summer or something, how you're going to keep them suitably challenged. So we always have extension work ready anyway. I mean, that's a given. In every lesson we teach, we have extension work ready. And it should provide challenge through greater depth. So we should never give more of the same. That is a terrible idea. That's just, there's no point in that. And we should never accelerate onto the next topic, or that's not considered to be good practice these days, to just move them on to the next topic. We should provide greater depth, and that just requires careful choice of resource. Okay, I'm going to show you a few examples of really good extension material you can use for lessons, not just during lockdown pandemic times, but just in general. Where can you get good extension work? I'm going to start by showing you Mathspad. It's the only thing I'm showing you that is subscription only. It's not that expensive, but you do need to pay a small amount to access most of their stuff. I use their stuff for extension all the time, particularly at Key Stage 3, but also all key stages. Like, for example, their mystery grids, which is pictured here, are these cute little puzzles, but they relate to the topic. So in here, this one is to do with primes and cubes and squares and stuff. So if I just taught number properties and I had someone who was just really good and really went through it quickly and got it all right, and they say, oh miss, I'm finished, and I'll give them this lovely puzzle to do, and it's related to the topic, but it's also a really nice stretch, and it's just lovely to see them get stuck into something that's a bit puzzly. As another example from Mathspad there, this is on when you're teaching divisibility rules, which some teachers just skip altogether. We must teach divisibility rules, they're such a good topic. And this is a really good stretch on divisibility rules. This is an extract from a Mathspad exercise. And that's the sort of thing that I would give to a student who kind of finished the work I'd set and was asking for something a bit more challenging. Mathspad's got loads of it. Another great place to get extension stuff is Median Don Stewart. So that's Don Stewart's blog. It's free. Google it, you'll find that. And he has fluency tasks, but they go on to rich thinking tasks. So this one, students are practicing expanding single brackets. There's loads of practice there, loads of fluency, 9 questions, lots for them to do. And then when they have completed those and you've seen that level of fluency, we've got this really nice rich task which goes with it, which is a bit more sort of greater depth and gives that kind of better level of challenge for those who found that bit fairly straightforward. So here they're having to say which of these 2 expressions sum to give this, and that kind of thing. So that's a rich task with more level of challenge. Other stuff from Don Stewart like this, say you were teaching fraction division and you wanted them to just do some fluency practice, but you also wanted maybe the whole class, or perhaps the stronger students in the class, maybe everyone, to move on to some kind of deeper thinking. And Don Stewart's got this task, 12 questions that are all fraction division. The ones near the end have some sort of cancelling and stuff, so there's some more to think about. But then those last 3 questions are richer, deeper tasks. So you've got that kind of inbuilt extension in one task here. Okay, so that's the sort of thing I mean when I talk about stretching and and challenging students. It's like exercises like this where we've got the fluency, but then we have the more kind of challenging aspect near the end. Open Middle is a really good source of free extension tasks, and once students get used to the format, they can just get stuck straight in with this. So in this one, they have to use the digits 1 to 9 to see if they can make a whole number sum. So if you're teaching fraction addition, this is a great extension. And you don't want them doing it randomly. You want them to really think about, how can I do this? What's a sensible way of doing it? The MA, who are kindly hosting this session for me, have a book called Problem Pages. Now, when I go to conferences and I man the MA stall, so I sell books on behalf of the MA, these get snapped up. Like, we normally sell them for £3 at conferences. They're a £5 online, and they are absolutely so popular. And the reason is that there's one for 11 to 14-year-olds and one 14 to 19-year-olds, and it's just a page full of extension problems with answers. And they're so good because you can just say you've got one student who's constantly asking for extension work. Just have one of these in your teacher box or in your desk, and that means you can just give them a page from this and say, right, have a go at that problem. And they're just so easy to use. They're just a helpful thing to have in your kit, so that if you ever are unprepared and you don't have a topic related extension ready, then you do have some lovely puzzles, which are of course always worth doing. Right, before I move on to just look at some general resources, just to mention that if you use my blog, resourceaholic.com, in my resource libraries, which you can use to plan all your lessons, because I've got resources for everything, there's quite a lot that's suitable for extension work. Okay, so all sorts of things. You could use UKMT or Enrich for extension work, but there's lots and lots of useful resources on my blog. Right, so I've totally taken much longer than I should here. I'm going to try and do 10 minutes on this and then give 10 minutes of questions. And we're going to talk about normality now. So let's just say for a minute, we are putting aside all the stuff to do with the pandemic and moving classrooms and not being able to help our students. And just say, if we're just talking about maths teaching, which we're still doing, what are the things we need to think about? And the first thing I think I want you all to have a think about is when you're planning to teach a topic, what things should you be considering? What things should be in your mind? So you look at your scheme of work and you say, right, the first thing I'm teaching is index laws. What do I need to think about? Now, if you've seen any of my presentations from the Topics in Depth series before, then you'll know this, because I always show this slide or something similar. This is the sort of thing you'll need to know. You'll need to know, first of all, what's on the curriculum. What do I need to cover? What's been covered before? What was on the primary curriculum? Where does it go in future years? Where does it go in A level? You need to know, does it link to any other subjects? What does the curriculum look like for this topic? What examples should I use, and what non-examples can I use to help to explain things? What explanation should I use? Some teachers in the early days of teaching, I suggested that they say their explanations out loud when they're planning their lessons to see which bits they're going to get stuck on. And it's such a good idea, because often when I'm halfway through an explanation, I realise that it's not as clear as I thought it was in my head. Assessment. First of all, how are you going to assess it? So how are you going to know, what hinge questions can you use to know whether your students get it? But also for assessment, what does it look like in GCSE or whatever key stage you're teaching at? What sort of questions come up on it? What will the misconceptions be? That's something where experienced teachers tend to know quite a lot about misconceptions, because they've seen students do them so many times. There have been misconceptions that have shocked me over the years, where I could never believe a student would do it till I saw it with my own eyes. And actually then you realise that there are things that students tend to do that we don't really plan for, because we haven't seen them ourselves before. What tasks and resources will we use? What vocabulary will be new to students, and how can we help them understand that vocabulary? Can we talk about the etymology of the words? Are there any other tools we can use? Are we going to bring any enrichment and narrative into our teaching? Are there any stories we can tell? I'm a big fan of narrative. And what methods are we going to use? Or are there different ways of doing things in this topic that we need to know about? And do we know how our colleagues are going to teach this topic? So all that stuff comes under on our radar when we're planning anything. And some of you might find it helpful to use a pro forma for this. So this is someone on Twitter called Tim Dolan. He's created this topic think through sheet. And it's just a sheet that you can fill in where you say, right, my first topic of the year is, say, index laws. And I'm going to fill in all these boxes just to show myself that I have thought through it in detail. This isn't to show anyone, this isn't evidence necessarily, but this is just, how can I say to myself that I have thought thoroughly about this topic before I've then planned my sequence of lessons? Have I thought about what prior knowledge the students need? Have I thought about how it links to other topics? Have I thought about what vocabulary is going to be new to them? So his sheet is really helpful. After this session, you'll get a copy of the slides. They'll be on the page where you can see the recording. And at the bottom of the slides, I've put a link to this, and everything else I talk about, there are links in the comments of the slides. Right, so once you've thought through the topic in sort of big picture like that, then you can plan out a timeline for your sequence of lessons. Now you have to be able to change these. So for example, there's a timeline for 14 lessons on trigonometry in year 11. Now I thought really carefully about that timeline, but it might be that I start teaching it and halfway through I think, no, I need more time on this thing, and I might need to change it. And here's another timeline. This is for my first 2 weeks with my year 8s this year, where I'm going to be doing index laws. And like I say, it might be that I get a few lessons in and I think actually they didn't get change of base, I need another lesson on that, so I'm going to adjust it. You have to be flexible, and that's why I say don't plan too much too rigidly in advance, because you have to respond to the students and what they can do and what they can't. Okay, so you might plan your topic big picture, and then you might plan a vague timeline, and then you can start planning the individual lessons. Planning individual lessons, from my observations, having visited lots of schools, go on a bit of a spectrum. At the one end of it, there are people, and there's lots of teachers like this, I've seen it happen, who download some slides from TES or from Dr. Frost or from someone's website. They download the slides and then they just deliver them. And they haven't even looked at those slides. And believe me, I have seen this many times. They literally find a slide on, so I saw someone teach a lesson where he wanted to teach circle theorems. He downloaded from TES some slides on circle theorems. He delivered that lesson having not even flicked through the slides, and you could tell, and there was a mistake on one of the slides where the circle theorem was just wrong. And he didn't know that was there because he hadn't looked through the slides. Now that is a sort of 1 on the scale of 1 to 10. The amount of thought that you put in, if you're working at that end of the spectrum, is a 1, and the amount of time it takes is a 1. It's super quick. We don't have much time, so there's some benefit in that. At the other end of the spectrum, we research everything in great detail. We really think about it. We do our research. We talk to lots of people. We gather lots of ideas. We find the best resources, and you get the idea. All of that, loads of stuff. Now that is really well thought through, but the time it takes is a 10 on the spectrum, and we haven't got time for that. And we have to be realistic here. We teach in a country that gives us very little time for planning, but yet expects quality lessons. And we know that in other countries in the world, they get maybe 3 times the amount of time we get for planning, and they can do it properly. So it's very hard to live at the top end of the spectrum. Some teachers do live at the bottom end of the spectrum. We all know that the best place is a balance. There might be 1 or 2 topics a year that I try and plan really in depth. And I know that I can use those lessons for years to come. But normally I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not researching things really deeply and spending forever planning stuff. In fact, at my stage in my career, I'm pretty much just reusing whatever I did last year. But I'm certainly not just downloading someone's slides and not looking at them. We don't want to be doing that. I don't want to talk too much about structuring lessons, but I do want to recommend Making Every Maths Lesson Count by Emma Mcrae. This is my quote when I read her book before it was published. I said it was accessible, succinct, and easily digestible. Making Every Maths Lesson Count neatly summarises the key ideas in maths teaching. Now, if you're joining teaching or recently joined teaching, you've not read this one, this is probably my top recommendation, just because it's not too long and it's really accessible. So it's easy to read without being kind of patronising or dumbing anything down. It doesn't do that at all. And it really does summarise some of the key ideas in lesson structures and things like that. Things like it tells you how to do mini whiteboards. So rather than just say, hey, it's a good idea to use mini whiteboards, it says, here's a routine that works for mini whiteboards. So I really, really recommend that. I'm not going to talk about lesson structures, but that's the thing that I recommend reading. Right, let's see, I'm going to do 5 minutes on resources and then I'm going to end. I've probably got way too many slides to do 5 minutes. I'd love to talk about resources all day. When you are choosing resources for your lessons, obviously there's things you're going to consider. Does it meet the aim? What is it you're trying to do? Are you trying to develop problem solving skills? Are you trying to develop fluency? Do you want your students to think deeply about something and ask you questions? All those things. You're going to think about, does it meet your aims? But you're also going to think, is it accessible? But is it also challenging? So we call that a low floor, high ceiling task. Can everyone access it? Everyone gets stuck in, but it offers some challenge. And then you've got to think about the practicalities. There are resources that exist with the wrong maths on them. Don't use those. There are resources with terrible spelling and grammar. Don't use those. Do you need to print it? Can you get away with not printing it? If you do need to print it, can you print it black and white, A5? Because really don't want to be printing colour, and definitely not printing everything in A4 all the time. And the instructions, straightforward, all that kind of thing. And finally, you're looking forward to using it. I love using some resources. It makes teaching a joy if I get to use, let's say, a Don Stewart resource. So there's some John Stewart resources, and I could show you all his resources today, and I'd be very happy to do that. But here's some examples. If you don't know his blog, do check it out. You can search by topic, and he's got all sorts of wonderful tasks. Just to give you an example, that coordinates one there, I took over a year 10 top set, and they were pretty bright, and I had to teach them linear graphs, and it said first lesson you're meant to do, and the scheme of work said I had to do coordinates. And I thought, I can't do coordinates with them. They've been doing coordinates since primary school, and they're year 10. So instead of doing a lesson where I reminded them how coordinates worked, which would be massively patronising, I gave them this John Stewart task, and it's got a couple of different sections to it, and they found it sufficiently challenging. They really got stuck in, and I was able to figure out, does anyone actually not understand coordinates in this room? And I could go and help them. So this sort of task is perfect for classes like that. I've already mentioned Mathspad, and again, I'd love to show you loads of their resources. But if you are lucky enough to get a school to work in a school that subscribes to it, then do check out all their wonderful stuff. Some of it's free, not much of it though, and their resources are absolutely brilliant. Maths for Everyone, fantastic stuff, and the questions are really, really carefully thought out, particularly for GCSE classes. I would use these. And Boss Maths. Now, if you don't know Boss Maths, it basically, if you have no time to plan your lesson and you have to use some slides from somewhere, please look at Boss Maths, because the guy behind Boss Maths is super smart, and he's really carefully thought through the lessons. They all have a starter examples, exercises, stretch questions, spot the mistake, and you can pick and choose the bits you use. You could use the whole lessons or just pick and choose. They're really, really good. They're free and they're available for every single topic. I use little extracts from it. I don't tend to teach other people's lessons. I teach my own stuff, but I use extracts from it all the time. You might know variationtheory.com already. That's one of Craig Barton's websites, and there's some really good stuff, particularly for projecting on the board. This stuff is particularly useful when you can't do handout, not the fill in the grid one at the bottom, but that one on indices there. It's really helpful for projecting on the board, and students do it in their book, which helps if you can't do handouts. So that whole website's got loads of stuff like that. Teach It Maths has got some lovely stuff. You can get the PDFs for free if you register. Don't think that you have to pay for that, because you don't. And this exercise, which is a crossword, but what I love about this exercise is that it's calculator skills, and our students don't use calculators at primary anymore, so they love using calculators in secondary, and this is a really good way of getting your students used to powers and roots and indices and how those buttons work. So that's from Teach It. A couple of classics before I go to questions. So CIMT, brilliant stuff, some really good scaffolding. So if you look at, for example, the exercise on the right there, where you can see it's standard index form, but there's a lot of scaffolding in that exercise, where it starts off with fill in the gaps and then becomes less and less information given. CIMT is classic and brilliant, and from my NQT year, it's been one of my most used resources. Cleve Books, if you haven't seen it, it's got lots of good stuff on it. I'm going to have to rush now because I'm really running out of time. I'm going to skip Smile, I'm going to skip Standards Unit. A lot of this stuff you can find on my blog. Right, there is so much. I understand if you find this really overwhelming. These are all websites that I use. I use every single one of these, and it's a lot, but I know where to go quickly because I've been doing this a long time. If you are feeling overloaded with resources, here's a few tips. First of all, save it when you see it, and save it into a very clever filing structure. So if I see a great resource on indices, then I'll put it on my computer in my drive in a folder called Indices Resources or something. So save things when you see them. Don't think you're going to remember, because you probably won't. If you ever have to work out answers, say it's a John Stewart task, he doesn't give answers, then take a photo of those answers and then save it with the resource on your drive. And then you won't have to do it again next year. You shouldn't be having to work out the same answers every year. So bear in mind, you'll probably use the same resource next year. So if you do have to work out the answers, don't lose them. Take a photo, file it. I'd say you should organise your files really well, particularly with numbered lessons. I'll show you what I mean by that. This was my year with year 11 one year. I think it was year 11. Yeah, this was a year with year 11. Oh no, it can't have been, because it says post-exam lessons. This must have been year 10. This was a year with year 10. And you can see that I numbered every topic, so I can see the order I taught it in. And if you go into, say, the let's see, the 12th folder there, which is inequalities, I can see exactly what I taught on inequalities, and I've numbered the lessons. So my first lesson stuff is there, my second lesson stuff was obviously graphical inequalities, my third lesson stuff was more graphical inequalities. But if I want to reuse those lessons next year, they're all in the right order, and I don't need to do any work on figuring out what goes where and what order I did them in. It's all there. So numbering my lessons was probably one of the best things I did. I didn't do it in my NQT year, I was a bit slow to realise, for reusing things the following year. It just saves so much time. I could just reuse all that stuff and it's all in the right order. I know exactly what to print for each lesson. So that's a really good idea. And finally, choose a few go-to websites. Here's my go-to websites. These are the ones I use all the time. I use Mathspad, Resourceaholic, that's my own blog. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but I go to my own blog and I look, for example, for the topic I'm teaching, and I see what I have used before. John Stewart, Boss Maths and CIM2, they're my top 5. You'll all have your own top 5. There'll all be things that you love, or that you grow to love if you're new to teaching. And that's pretty much the order I check things in. So Mathspad is not linked through my blog, so I have to go there first, and then everything else is normally linked through my blog. But you'll get your own list, and you can't look at every website for every single thing you teach. Right, I'm going to end with a little bit of general advice. The first thing I want to say is pace yourself if you're new to teaching. I know not everyone here is new to teaching, but those of you who are new, please don't feel like you have to do a million things in your first year. Okay, I think when I joined teaching, I thought, oh, I have to run a club at lunch, but no one said I had to. And I think that kind of thing just took up a lot of time and overwhelmed me, when actually I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to try and seek promotion in my first couple of years and stuff like that. And you can if you want, but don't feel like you have to. Don't be afraid to ask if it's anything you're not sure about. You're not going to annoy anyone if you ask a million questions. It's absolutely fine to ask lots of questions. Hopefully, if you're new to teaching, you'll have a mentor who is designed for that. But you know, if you don't know how to use a photocopier, ask. Yeah, all these things, ask, because people will help you. Don't plan too far in advance. I mentioned that already. It sometimes goes a bit wrong. And try and prioritise these 2 things. So first of all, getting your behaviour management right. Depends on the sort of school you're in, but if you're working in a typical comprehensive, then that will be your absolute priority, is trying to get those routines and behaviours in place. Bad behaviour can make it all horrible. It can make the whole thing just really suck being a teacher. So that's your absolute priority. And then your explanations. How are you going to explain the maths? Okay, that should be the main thing you spend your time thinking about. Not resources, but explanations. And finally, enjoy it, because being a maths teacher is amazing. And even though this year is going to be crazy, we're all going to learn a lot from this experience. We're all going to be better teachers as a result. So try and enjoy what's to come. Okay, right. I'm going to have a quick look at the Q&A now. I've only got 5 minutes. I don't want to overrun. So I will have a quick look if there's any sort of big questions. Just to mention that you can obviously follow me on Twitter. I'm MathsGem. If you have any further questions after this. This was a free seminar. If you want to buy me a drink, then go to buymeacoffee.com/mathsgem, and I've got an account there. You can buy me a glass of wine. And the MA is the oldest subject association in the world, founded in the 1800s, which makes it super old, and could really do with support from maths teachers. Just join the MA if you want to show your support for something that's been around forever and has always helped maths teachers. Right, I'm going to have a quick look at the Q&A now. Let's see how I do this. Q&A, right. How do I plan to mark work, from Lizzie? That is a really good question. I never have marked books ever. Okay, so I am not a class work marker, and we won't be able to take books in, so that doesn't really make much difference to me. All my homeworks are Hegarty Maths, so I will be using that to see how my students are getting on. The only marking I normally do are assessments, and we do big assessments twice a year, but we also do smaller assessments twice every half term. My understanding is that we can set those, I'm not sure, I think we can set them on paper, but then we have to not touch them for a couple of days before we mark them or something like that. So it might be better to actually set them online tasks instead. So what I recommend for that question is have a listen to Gemma Sherwood on Craig Barton's podcast. He just came out yesterday. She talks a lot about marking and how she's planning to do it. But I think really for our, like I say, homework's all online, and for our little assessments, perhaps we're going to do those online as well, so that we don't have to touch the paper. But I don't do bookmarking anyway, so it's not a big issue. But yeah, listen to Jen and Sherwood. Holly has said she has to teach 100-minute lessons. That's really tough. Now, Holly, someone on Twitter asked that this morning. It was Dawn Denyer. The responses to that will be helpful. Also, and I can't think who it was, but someone once wrote a blog post about this, which was really helpful. I would recommend really breaking that into two 50-minute lessons. So I would say do your kind of teach a concept, have some kind of little break in the middle, and then sort of almost start again. But I've never done 100-minute lessons, so I don't really know. I think there are some schools where it's even more challenging. Some schools are doing entire day maths lessons. Can you believe it? A whole day of maths lessons where they last 5 hours. So compared to that, 100 minutes doesn't sound too bad. But what I'll do, Holly, is I'm going to try and find the link to the blog post about that, and then I'll put it in at the bottom of this slide. I'll make a note of that. But like I say, there should be a conversation on Twitter about that today. If you look at Mrs. Denya, she asked the question this morning, so it's worth looking at that. Annika got an idea. Instead of a meter ruler, I could use soft tape measure. That's a great idea, Annika. You're right. I can't carry a meter ruler in my box, but I can put a tape measure. That is a really good idea. Sorry, I've just lost my slides. And let me just check. Any more questions? The wheeled bags, I'm afraid I've never used a wheeled bag. Again, if you ask that question on Twitter, I'm sure lots of people will be able to recommend one. It doesn't help me because I have stairs in my thing, and I'd actually rather just carry a big box because it's only, for me, it's only short journeys. I'm sorry, I've never used a mini bag, wheeled bag. And last question I'm going to take is, without mini whiteboards, this person saying there are, says Kirsty, saying she's a circulator. I'm a circulator too, Kirsty. I love circulating and loves mini whiteboards. Oh, I would say to you, first of all, I'd say to SLT, other schools are doing mini whiteboards, why can't we? Like I say, all my students are going to have one individually. Some students will have them in their planners. I mean, most schools do that now. They have a mini whiteboard page in their planner. And if they have a mini whiteboard pen in their pencil case, they should still be able to do it. So find out if that's possible. If not, listen to Gemma Sherwood talk about this on her Craig Barton podcast yesterday. She's suggesting she's going to do multiple choice questions more and have the students have a page in their exercise book where they have a big A, a big B, a big C, a big D. So the students will answer the multiple choice questions by holding up their exercise book open on a certain page instead of using mini whiteboards, which is really tricky because you can't show the workings then. So I appreciate that's really, really tough. But I would say to leadership, is there a way, if the planner's got a page they can use as a mini whiteboard, could it be that they just hold up some paper and show your workings? I don't know, but that is, I can understand that's really frustrating. Who would I recommend we follow on Twitter, Ian? I don't know if you're joking. Have a look at my most recent blog post where I say I don't give lists. I recommend you follow the MA on Twitter. And that's all the questions, right? So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. It's dead on 12 o'clock. Yay, I did it. I really appreciate you coming to my seminar. If you have any more questions, you can ask them on Twitter, and I will provide links and ideas and retweet things so that other people can help you. But really, I am really, really pleased that you have taken an hour out of your day today to have a think about September, and I just wish you all luck with the year ahead. Okay, so I am going to, I'm just looking at the chats. Yep, thank you. Oh, thank you. People are saying nice things. Okay, I'm going to close the seminar now. So feel free to go, and I will. Hold on, I'm getting more questions. No, I'm not. And I will shut the seminar down now. So bye. Thank you for coming.